Okay guys, so today I wanted to do a quick video on how to properly adjust a English style fleece hackamore. Now this is my bridle that I have for Bugsy right now. This is the one that goes with my Wintech. So with hackamores, you have to be really careful as to where you put them because you're putting a lot of pressure on their nose, and if you actually put it too far down, you can do a lot of damage to the bone and cartilage because the way that a horse's skull is shaped is they have a thin triangle that comes down in front of their nasal cavity. So they have their nasal cavity on either side, and then they have a thin bone right in the middle. And if you put too much pressure on that bone, you can fracture it, you can possibly break it, and you can damage the cartilage that surrounds it that makes up their nose. If you put it up too high, you aren't going to really get the proper feel that your horse needs, and you're probably going to have a little bit harder time communicating through your hackamore. Now I see a lot of people put on hackamores and they think, oh, I can just put my hackamore on however I feel like, or whatever adjustment that looks okay, and that's not correct. There's actually a correct way to adjust these hackamores. So I'm going to put my hackamore on Bugsy, and it's adjusted to the correct size for her at the moment, so then I'll come back and show you what it looks like and how it's supposed to fit. Okay, so now that I have the hackamore on Bugsy, I'm actually going to have her step up a little bit. Good girl. Alright, so the first thing that you want to check is where it sits on the nasal bone of your horse. Now the way that you can check that, really easy. If you know horse anatomy pretty well, you can kind of eyeball it and see like, oh, that's sort of where the bone is. But the easiest way to tell where the nasal cavity bone starts is if you just feel ever so gently on their nose. Now right now my finger is right where the nasal cavity or the cove starts, where it comes down into the teeth and down into the little triangular bone. That's right there. So my hackamore is actually perfectly placed for her head size. Now some horses have the cove starts a little bit further down, some horses it starts a little bit higher up. But what you want is you want that bottom piece of your hackamore to be no lower than where that cove starts and where you feel that little C shape coming into their face. So if you look at the side of her face, I'm going to ask her to tilt her head here a little bit. You can see that the cheek, the bottom of the shank is almost at her lip. Now depending on your horse's face, you might be a little bit higher than the lip, you might be a little bit lower than the lip, or the corner of the mouth I should say. But it should be in that general area. That gives you kind of an idea if your horse doesn't really want you feeling on their nose, because some horses get a little sensitive there. Or if your horse is a little sensitive to touch, that's another way where you can kind of estimate as to how well your hackamore fits. Now, another thing to check for is to make sure that you've got at least 2 fingers, or you've got at least a finger between this cheek protrusion and the top of the shank, because what happens is when you engage the shank, this back piece of the shank will actually rub against the protrusion if you're too close to it. Good girl. Alright, so the garbage man is gone. Well, he's leaving. So the noise is gone, and he stayed relatively still. But what I was saying is the protrusion of the nose, you want to make sure that you give a little bit of leeway, that way it doesn't rub or cause discomfort. Again, depending on the type of hackamore that you're using, that little bit of leeway is going to be a bit different. If you have a hackamore to where you can't sit the noseband on the correct spot without having the back piece rub, you have too large of a hackamore for your horse's head. Or the type of hackamore that you're trying to put on the horse is too big or too arcing. I know that I don't really care for the little S ones because I find that the arc is too big for her size face. She has a bit of a smaller face, which is why I like these ones, because that's a fairly small purchase area on the shank. So now I'm going to adjust her hackamore too long to where I see a lot of people have it. That way you can see where is not as acceptable. Okay, so this is where I see a lot of people putting their hackamores. It's not a very good spot. It actually can cause damage because right now, the end of her nasal bone is about there, and it's sitting right on the edge. So what happens is when you put pressure on that nose bone, you're actually putting pressure on a very sensitive area where there's a lot of nerves, and that's why the horses are responding better. Some people say that you need to put a hackamore down really low. That way a horse will respond to you and you'll get that faster response. But that's just like putting a bigger bit on a horse that needs a snaffle. You're putting a bigger bit in the horse's mouth, or you're putting the hackamore down too low, and it's causing more pain, so the horse is reacting to that pain. It's not that the horse is responding and being respectful to the hackamore. It's that they're saying, ow, that really hurts, I need to get this pressure away. So if I feel her nose bone here, her cavity is right up here. The top of her nose band isn't even touching where the cavity is, where the cavity starts, where it's supposed to be. So that tells me this hackamore is not at a good placement. You can see the shank bit is almost at the bottom of her chin. So this all around is not a very good setup for a hackamore. This can do a lot of damage. It could possibly break the nose. It could damage the cartilage. It could give them breathing issues. Because when you pull on this, it's actually going to start to close off their airways, and then they can't breathe properly. So you want to be careful to not put your hackamore down too low. Okay, now my hackamore is back to where it's supposed to be, back to its proper adjustment, which is as tight as this bridle can go. As you can see, my cheek piece is up way at the top of her head. That's perfectly fine. What I don't like to see is when the cheek piece is right along their eye, because in the off chance that your bridle does slip forward, it can poke them in the eye. There is no way that this head stall is going to hurt her in any way with the way that it's adjusted at the moment. But some people don't like having their cheek pieces up this high. Unfortunately, Bugsy has a small head, and pony sizes are too small for her, and horse sizes are just small, or just the right size to where if I put it up the highest it'll go, it's perfect. But the last thing that I want to talk about before we end this video is giving your horse room in their mouth and around their face on the hackamore. So I can fit a couple of fingers underneath this nose band without any issue. And it's not pinching me, it's not causing any discomfort. As you can see, Bugsy's not thinking she has to back up. So you want to make sure that you have enough room on the top of the nose band. You want to be able to fit a hand in between this cheek piece, or the shank, and your horse's face. And you also want to fit a couple of fingers underneath the curb chain or curb strap. I personally have a curb strap on mine. I don't really care for curb chains because those can dig into your horse's jaw, and I would rather have something leather that has a bit more give and a bit more stretch to it. But you want to overall make sure that when you pull back and you engage on this hackamore, that you're not going to be clamping your horse's mouth shut. If you're clamping their mouth shut, it's probably not that comfortable for them. You want to be able to where this starts to engage, and then a little while later your curb strap starts to engage. So if I actually put my finger underneath the nose band, I can feel, here if I do this, I have a finger underneath my nose band and a finger underneath my curb strap. I start to feel this one already, and I'm just now starting to feel the curb strap, and it's already engaged quite a bit. I don't know if you can tell, but I've got it at about 45-degree angle, and my curb strap is just now starting to engage. And if I go back even more, and it's a very slight engage, like I was just starting to feel the pressure. So all of the pressure is mostly on her nose and not a lot back here. I don't want a lot of pressure underneath her jaw. What I want is the pressure on her nose because I want her to respond to the nose. She'll also get a little bit of pull pressure here, but not a whole lot. Where you want all of your pressure is to be right here. But if you have it so tight to where your horse can hardly open its mouth to begin with, then you'll have pressure all the way around their nose and on the top of their poll, and that can get really confusing for horses, and I think that's why a lot of people have issues with hackamores, is because they have it either too low, it's too tight, or it's too high, and the horse doesn't understand the pressure, they get overwhelmed by it. And just to prove that Bugsy can perfectly open her mouth, I will grab a treat. This proves that yes, she can open her mouth and chew and be absolutely happy with the hackamore. And yeah, guys, we're going to end it there whilst Bugsy scrounges for more.